Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome to Books That Make You. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and today we're talking about books that make you enter a cyberpunk world where tech and fantasy merge. Supernatural meets ultramodern in this week's show. Who doesn't love speculative fiction? You know, the kind that takes readers to twisted worlds where technology and heroes and sheroes and villains and philosophies, ideas all clash. The writers who take up such complex and compelling writing are often pretty complex themselves. A mix of high tech and wicked creativity are often the combination that is needed. Let's talk to Ryan Southwick today. He is a Silicon Valley tech guy, and he's been instrumental in real modern technology that is helping the world. Plus, he is the author of the thrilling ZTech Chronicles, and it pulls in from his real world experience, his knowledge, and the research that he's done to deliver this just fantastical adventure series. Ryan is an expert in Agile software development. He was on the ground level of Agile software transformation, and he's also a former radiation therapist who helped treat cancer patients. He's been in software development for 30 years, making everything from 3D games to mission-critical business applications to help cure cancer. Wow. He was on the LA Book Fest World is Getting Closer panel, which you can watch on the Books That Make You YouTube channel. And he's also a drone enthusiast, and apparently he likes to race his drone over ancient volcanoes. More of that in a little bit. Ryan, hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, Desiree. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Okay, let's start with the big issue, the big idea of your book, and just the fact that you as a programmer have put together the ZTech Chronicles. Can you just kind of tell us how Ryan, the author, borrowed from Ryan, the programmer, in creating this book series?
Well, a couple of different ways. So, as you said, there's a heavy technology theme in the book. Of course, it is urban fantasy. It is science fiction. You know, if you were to try to take those practices and actually make something, it would not work, right? But the fun part about writing a series like this was being able to take all of the work that I've done and all of the evolution that I've seen over the last 20 to 30 years, and take that and put it into fiction and make that as believable as possible, right? So it's like taking it to the very edge of what's believable, but then spattering it with things that if I was in IT, that's how I'd build a robot, or that's how I'd back up a program, or how I do something, just to make it that much more believable and hopefully immersive.
Yeah, and people who love science fiction really do appreciate when the science fiction is right on the edge of what is plausible, factual, what could actually happen. So it's great that you do that. Can you talk a little bit about the actual process? And I want to get into your Agile software development background a little bit too. Okay, let's face it. We have pantsers, we have plotters. Is there going to be a new category? Are there going to be Agile authors soon?
I think there already are Agile authors. In fact, so funny enough, one of the people who taught me Agile, one of the first coaches that I worked with, wrote a book on Agile, not surprisingly, and says the only reason that she was able to get through it was by sticking to a Scrum rhythm. And holding yourself accountable every 2 weeks, and actually producing something and evaluating that and reflecting and things like that. And so I'm certainly not the first. Absolutely.
Can we dig into that a little bit? And I actually, before several years back, I was the vice president of a digital marketing agency, and I remember Agile being the buzzword, and that's how people were being adaptive, and Scrum. But for the person who might not be familiar with those terms, can you define them a little bit for us?
Sure. At a high level, I always tell people Agile is an iterative way for motivated people to get stuff done. So too often in the software world, and this is going back years. Today I think the landscape looks a little bit different. It was too often when you started making software, you would put together you'd spend a year putting together this lengthy set of requirements, and then you would give it to a company, and they would go away for 2 years and work on that, and not necessarily iterate, and then come back with something that probably wasn't what you wanted anyway, because the feedback mechanisms weren't there, and there were assumptions made, basically, that the assumption that software development was like manufacturing, right? Mm-hmm. And it was actually derived from some of the people who worked with manufacturing processes way back in the day, 30, 40, 50 years ago, right? And those same people who iterated on and were manufacturing experts, when they took a look at the process that people were trying to apply to software, they said, no, actually, it's nothing like that. Software development is a creative process, and creative processes require frequent iteration, frequent feedback, and usually high touch and high collaboration, because there isn't a straight line to the finish, right? It's kind of like this, kind of like this, kind of like this, and it requires frequent course corrections, because oftentimes what people ask for isn't necessarily what they actually want, or worse, what they actually need, and they don't actually know that until they see it and they can put their hands on it. And so Agile really is a way of doing instead of talking and planning, and putting something in front of the people who need it as soon as possible, and getting that feedback, iterating on it, correcting course, and sometimes delivering the software a whole lot sooner than it would be, because they might get to a certain point, maybe well ahead of of everything they'd asked for, and suddenly that is exactly, it's actually everything they need. They didn't need everything they asked for, they just need this. And so right. Agile helps make that happen.
Okay, so how do you apply that to writing, to the craft of writing and planning your novel, your writing?
So when I write, I apply the same sort of principles. So I'll write a couple of chapters, and then I will go back and I'll look over those chapters, and I'll actually read them, and I might actually also release those couple of chapters to my alpha reader, and get feedback on that. Say, okay, am I on the right course? Is this character on the right course? Am I doing okay? And if the answer is no, then I'll go back to the beginning, and I'll actually, I'll use a software term, I'll refactor the book and the character and the plot line, so that it does match, and then continue on, essentially, writing the story, and basically just do that throughout the entire cycle of the book. So it's one long feedback loop, and hopefully, again, involving the people who are actually reading the book, the consumers, right, of the
sure.
book. So,
sure. Mm-hmm. And now with your series, because this is not just one book, you have many books in this series. So are you doing this as you work across the series, or are you just taking it one book at a time? I mean, do you have an outline so that do you know what book 6, 7, 8 is, or are you?
Yeah, so going to another Agile, I don't want to call Agile a philosophy, but Agile practice is a thing of user stories, right? So a user story is basically a really lightweight requirement. That's it's oftentimes referred to as a reminder for a conversation. And again, this is nothing new for authors, right? And most authors use story cards, for outlining. I pretty much do the same things. I'll create really high level story cards, and then fill those in as I get closer to writing that story card. I'll start filling in more details, and I might also determine that actually the story cards that come after it, or maybe further down the line, are no longer relevant. So I will tear those up, and digitally, of course, I've got all of this in a management system, and start over. right? And the same thing too, like you were saying, for multiple books, right? So I went through the first book, and I had a rough idea where things are going, but as most authors know, the books oftentimes take on a life of their own. And so by the time I got to the end of the third book, several things had changed, and so including the protagonist had changed a little bit. And so there was a constant refactor of going back to the first book and making some adjustments, and then the second book and making some adjustments, and then through the third. And so it was, to make the entire series flow, it was a constant iteration process over the entire series.
That makes perfect sense. And, there's those two philosophies. And a lot of times you have people that are actually somewhere in between. There's very few true plotters or true pantsers. And it sounds like you're doing what, kind of is in between. So you have that overarching idea of where you're going, but then just true to the word, you're agile as you do it, and you can change and reiterate as you go along. So how about if you tell us, we were talking about the ZTech Chronicles. Give us the lowdown, set the stage, tell us about it. Give us that big overarching overview so people can learn more about it.
So, so the ZTech Chronicles is I wouldn't necessarily call it cyberpunk, because it's contemporary. So you're not walking into a futuristic setting, and people aren't jacking into computers in their heads and things like that. But it does have a heavy tech theme that lends itself towards that. So the series itself mostly takes place in the Bay Area. It is an epic urban fantasy. So the first book starts with the protagonist, Anne Perrin, who's a waitress in San Francisco with some psychological issues that she's working through, and happens to run into these extraordinary people and these extraordinary circumstances, and the psychopath who is trying to kill her, and which would be hard enough for an average person to deal with. So she has the additional burden of dealing with her existing issues and trying to get through that. But as I said, it's an epic urban fantasy. So the best part for me was being able to set the stage over, the first book in San Francisco with a small group of people. The second book, and I don't want to ruin anything, but, taking on a larger scope and more people, and the protagonist taking on more responsibility and, more burden. The third book, even more so. And by the time you get to the fourth book, it really is more of a global scale issue that same protagonist is dealing with, and watching, this I want to say poor broken waitress, evolve over the series into something extraordinary. Was a whole lot of fun.
Well, and that's what we love about characters like that. We love the characters that rise as sheroes and heroes to us. Talk about that a little bit, because you're a guy, and you're writing from a female point of view. So I think you knew that, right?
I do. And I tell you what, so it was 2 years. I was writing this book for about 2.5 years before I even told anybody I was writing it. Not even my wife knew I was writing a book.
Okay.
I think I was through the second edit before I told anybody. And the first person I told was my mom, funny enough, who's very progressive, very liberal, very very wonderful person, of course. And when I told her that I was writing from a female protagonist point of view, her response was, "Huh, really? Okay." So I'm not sure what she was expecting, but she's often said that she, quote unquote, raised me right. So she actually ended up being the very first person who ever read the book, and I was sweating bullets for the exact reason that it's of all people who are reading it, it's my mom, seeing if I actually could get into the head of another gender and write it without being insulting and and be appropriate. And it sounds like for the most part I got it right. And I've heard that from many of the alpha and beta readers who've gone through it. But I was actively soliciting feedback, not only from her, but from my editor, and a lot of people who offered some corrections. But I was very pleased to see that there weren't a whole lot. But a lot of it just had to do. I mean, I hate to use the word empathy. Right, empathy with my coworkers and my friends and my family and my two daughters, who are huge parts of my life, really helped.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It can be controversial in the world of writing when somebody writes from somebody else's point of view. There's accusations of appropriation and not having empathy, not understanding. Yet at the same time, I come from the mindset of if you're going to truly understand humanity, and that's part of what reading, storytelling is, right? It is literally when somebody is reading any book, they slip into the skin of that protagonist, and they might bounce around and slip into other people's skin too. But that's that immersive, wonderful effect of reading that almost nothing else gives us. So I think that's a courageous thing to do.
And the theme continues into the book, in fact. So the first challenge was me getting into the protagonist's head, which hopefully I did well. And the second theme is also the people in the book are different, and there's a big focus in the book on relationships. Right. So again, it's an adventure through San Francisco, but it's a very personal adventure, especially for Anne and her journey of healing. And the people that she interacts with are very, very different. And so it also requires her to get into their heads and understand where they're coming from, to be able to establish those relationships and to flourish. So that was, and some of them, again, have very, very different ways of thinking. Their minds work incredibly differently. So it was a fun challenge.
And you've done a lot of research to kind of get into their heads. And I know that you've researched heavily into PTSD, for example. Do you want to talk about that?
I did. So the protagonist she has a form of PSD from a trauma as a teenager, and again, same thing as writing from the perspective of a female protagonist. I wanted to make sure that hey, here's somebody with PTSD, that I wasn't just making things up and inadvertently insulting anybody or worse, downplaying anything, because I especially the more that I researched, the more I realized how debilitating and serious that condition is, and how deleterious it is to so many people's lives every day. And so I when I made the decision to I can't even say make the decision. Again, the book kind of took on its own life. She ended up with this trauma after a couple of iterations. But once I recognized what it was, I stopped and I did weeks of research on the internet, as much reading as I could on the disorder. Even reached out to some friends of mine who were unfortunate enough to have suffered or continue to suffer the disorder, to make sure that what I had put into words was realistic, at least from one or two people's perspective, of how it was, how they had actually experienced it. Absolutely.
And let's go back to technology a little bit, because when you talk about some of the themes in the book, and some of the things that you can pull from your professional experience as well, technology can really be our ally. It can be our friend. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, especially because you were on The World is Getting Smaller panel, and that was part of it too. And I think we'd be remiss to not realize that nowadays, with everything that's going on in the world, technology is playing a bigger and bigger role.
Yeah, and that, boy, we could talk for 3 days about that. It's how technology has changed and how it's made the world better. I guess bringing it to my experience, most recently. So, as you said, I was a radiation therapist for many years. Working with that sort of life-saving technology every day, which was fantastic. Fast forward, heck, you want to talk about science fiction, right? When I was a kid, the kind of stuff that I'm working with right now, I work for a company that facilitates the next generation of breakthrough genetic therapies for cancer treatment.
Oh.
My gosh, let me just say that again. We're modifying genes, right?
Yeah.
So, back in the day, and radiation therapy is still a primary modality, treatment modality for a lot of people. But that and chemotherapy were pretty much your only options. Now, part of the software that I'm helping develop. If a patient is diagnosed with a certain sort of cancer with certain indications, they can go in, they can have their blood drawn, they can send that away to a manufacturing site. That manufacturing site can genetically modify their blood, their own blood, expand the cells so there's more of them, and then send it back, inject it back in their bodies, and that genetically modified blood fights the cancer, and kills it off.
That's okay. Yeah. You're giving me shivers. I don't know if you can tell. I'm just like, okay, there's nanobots in my body now. Like,
yeah.
what is it? Yeah, mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's the thing. It's even. I mean, nanobots would be one thing. This, in my mind, this is even more miraculous. Ooh, this isn't nanobots. This is your own cells genetically reprogrammed.
Right.
Absolutely astounding.
So could I grow a different arm? Could you genetically modified? Could I?
We're getting there.
Wings,
we're getting
learn
there.
to fly.
Yeah, we're getting there. Yeah, it's they've got, and I'm not an expert in those areas, but there's a lot of research into extracting stem cells, let's say from the skin or something like that, to regrow an ear or eye tissue or hearing nerve cells and things like that from your own cells, and then being able to implant that. Again, not an expert, couldn't tell you how far that's gone, but even like 10 years ago, when I was working for an umbilical stem cell harvesting and storage company, they were looking into technology like that. And it has exploded over the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years.
And again, it goes back to, and this is why science fiction overall is just so delicious, because, and especially for somebody like you who are in these technologies, you're working with this stuff, to be able to take that and use it as inspiration and go off with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, in all honesty, when you start talking about the ears, I've seen the ear in the Petri dish or on the mouse's back going back, 10, 15 years already. So yeah. It's been around for a while.
It has. And the sad-ish part is that, when I started writing the book, and this was, I want to say like 6 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. The technology in the book sounded a whole lot more impressive than it does today.
Yeah, it catches up fast, doesn't it? It kind of makes you feel like, okay, I can't look 10 years in the future. I got to look 20 years in the future, because we're speeding up, right? The singularity is coming up pretty darn quickly here, I think.
And I think that's where, as a science fiction author, you can't be afraid to push the envelope, because you almost have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's more of a documentary.
Exactly. So, okay. I love the theme that technology is our friend. How do you feel that everybody in our everyday lives, what are the things that we can do by taking some personal responsibility?
For
like, how can we make the world a better place within our own lives? Like, are there things that we can do to help improve the state of the world?
Oh, absolutely. And I guess if we're going with the theme of technology, of course, everybody has access to social media. Almost everybody's on social media. I think, honestly, a lot of it, at the end of the day, it's not about the technology. It is about how we use it. You can, the best technology in the world is no substitute for humanity. or good or ill will. So it's in my mind, honestly, it's just being very, very conscious, not only of what you're posting, but what you're reposting and what you're digesting that other people post, and really putting that filter of empathy on, trying to really in every aspect, trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and then thinking, okay, well, if I repost this or if I post this, how does that affect those other people? So it's really extending that concept of our sense of community, our duty as community members, to the world. Because when you go on social media, you're not just working in a small community. Everything you post is really, you're representing to the world.
Exactly. And, I think that, again, we could do a whole show just on social media and the impact today. And, me, I come from the marketing background, and it's interesting how that form of media has really just influenced the world. Mm-hmm. I don't think that 12 years ago, I think that's about when Twitter first came out, right? When it was first launched at South by Southwest.
Oh, goodness.
Could you have imagined then? Could you imagine going back in time and being there and saying, you know what, this platform is going to be used by the President of the United States to do this, this, and this?
As a sword, yes.
You would not have been able to comprehend that. And It's amazing how organically that all takes effect. And I think you're right. At the core of it as individuals, using our own empathy and looking at what we're posting, what we're saying, the communities that we're in online, and looking at it through the lens of somebody else's eyes is probably one of the best things that we can do. Okay, let's go back to your books. Angels in the Mist. Mm-hmm. That is the first book in the series, just came out. So we talked about the series as a whole. Do you want to just dig into the first book a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said before, it's an epic urban fantasy. So the first book starts in San Francisco, again, relatively modern day. Hard to keep up with modern these days because technology is changing so quickly. So please forgive me that. But it starts off, with Anne Perrin, who again is a waitress with some personal issues that she's PTSD that she's trying to deal with, and basically unfortunately like a lot of people struggling to get by day to day, and that's compounded by the fact that she's in the Bay Area working as a waitress and trying to live by herself, which is very, very difficult to do with the cost of living, and I don't think that's changed in 30 years in the Bay Area. So and she finally, like a lot of people, she finally gets to the point where she realizes that she can't continue the way that she is if she ever wants a prayer of being happy. And so she decides to put herself out there. But it's difficult because, just because you make that decision doesn't mean your problems go away. And she just unfortunately happens upon the wrong person.
Yeah.
And it ends up escalating, a little bit out of control. But fortunately, and that's a little bit where the title comes from, Angels in the Mist. There's not a literal angel, but a guardian angel who ends up digging her out of a situation that really, she does her best, her God's honest best to get out of it. But ends up being rescued by this other gentleman who introduces her, and that kind of starts her down this path that she just introduces her to this interesting world of super science that she just absolutely had no idea existed. And the funny part about that is actually the character is a little bit of a technophobe. So she's kind of introduced to this world. Yeah, exactly. Where she doesn't necessarily like her cell phone in a lot of ways. But but the interesting thing again is she's just because she has these issues does not mean she's not likable. It doesn't mean she doesn't have a tremendous number of really good qualities and really just a lot to offer everybody around her, right? And that's what these other group of very interesting people end up discovering, that, she brings to them every bit as much, if not a lot more, than they ever brought to her. And so there's a tremendous amount of give and take. And so so Angels in the Mist really dives into her journey, not only trying to avoid this psychopath, but also dealing with this I almost want to call it an alternate reality. That is, being a technophobe, just trying to wrap her mind around all these incredible concepts, and while at the same time, trying to heal and establish these relationships that she has wanted for 18 years, trying to form those with, these very extraordinary people.
Right. Well, it's a little bit, I mean, that's the thing, right? There is that something special, je ne sais quoi, in all of us. And when you're able to find somebody who can help bring that out, that's a magical thing. So it reminds me, this is like a bit like a twisted Alice in Wonderland, where she kind of goes down this rabbit hole. And
it's a little like Alice in Wonderland. I also like to compare it a little bit to The Princess Bride. And I know a lot of people do that, but it has The Princess Bride was, as a lot of people know, it was criticized and had a little bit of difficulty because it had a little bit of everything in it, right? There was romance, there was adventure, there was comedy, there was all kinds of stuff. And I'd like to think that Angels in the Mist has a lot of that too. It'll make you cry, it will make you laugh, it will make you inspired. There's plenty of action in it, action scenes as well, as well as plenty of depth. So hopefully, no matter what it is you like, there'll be something in there for you.
Okay, really quick. We don't have a lot of time, but I have to touch on, you fly drones over ancient volcanoes and you race them. And they're the point of view ones, right? Where you are actually immersed.
Yes.
Okay.
So you wear the goggles, and yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just real quick. So and the volcano part is fascinating for anybody who hasn't been there. Most people, if you live in California, or even if you haven't, you know where Yosemite is. Most people don't know that east of Yosemite, so east of the Sierras, is Mono County, which is absolutely gorgeous. And it was also the largest caldera in the world, 25 square miles of lava, if you can imagine, like back in the, way back in the day. And so it left this ring of ancient volcanoes. I mean, you can't look in a direction and not see a volcano. I think most people don't know that. And so, so my brother and my brother is also very into that. When I go out to visit him, we both take our drones out there, and some of these are like half a mile across. They're absolutely enormous. And being able to fly along the volcanoes and seeing the obsidian, and just knowing that, my God, this blew its top 20 million years ago or whatever, is just absolutely mind-blowing, because they're just enormous. So
so cool.
Wonderful. And being able to see it first person, like flying over, just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. Okay, Ryan, really quick, where can people find Angels in the Mist, find you online, your website, social media? Give us all the details.
Absolutely. So Angels in the Mist is available on Amazon. So if you search for Angels in the Mist and put my name in, you'll find it. It's also, you can get the details from my website. I'm at ryansouthwickauthor.com, all one word. That's ryansouthwickauthor.com. You can also find me on Facebook. If you look for Ryan Southwick, you can find my author page. Also on Instagram. If you look up Ryan Southwick, I'm probably the only one on there. Would love to hear from you.
Excellent. Ryan, thanks so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Desiree.
You bet. And once again, everyone, my name is Desiree Duffy, and thank you for joining us here today on the Books That Make You show. And you can find out more about us. Just go to our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. And I have a feeling there's an interview or two or an article or so with Ryan in there, so you can find out more about him and his books there as well. And you can also follow us. We're on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget that YouTube channel. And you can find out more information about all of the other shows that we've done in the past. They're all there. And the LA Book Fest as well. Again, Ryan was on one of those panels, so make sure you check that out. Until next time, everybody, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.